baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world.
Welcome to the Sweet Spot. My name is Lynn, your host, and Ken's my co-host. How's it going, Ken?
Lynn, it is going. I'm looking forward to this episode because the world has changed.
It really is. The Sweet Spot is the number one Disneyland podcast hosted by two former Disneyland Custodial cast members.
Woohoo!
We are the number one for that.
We're number one.
So, thank you for joining us. This is episode 308.
Oh my, 308.
I know.
Yeah, you have to go back and listen to every single prior episode to understand what's going on. No, you don't. They're pretty much self-contained, but you will enjoy past episodes.
For sure.
Yes.
We're really excited. This is going to be a great episode. As we record this, Disneyland had its opening day for the public. There was a couple days prior to this recording that we had, cast member previews and stuff. But I think I'm really excited about it. We'll talk more in our current events about it. But in a way, I was thinking about this earlier, Ken. In a way, this is sort of a sign that things are getting better. We're getting closer to the end of this. If Disneyland can open, then that's a good sign, right?
That is a good sign.
Yeah, seems like a lot of people kind of think that, like, oh, Disneyland's open now. Cool, we've made it.
We finally have hope again.
Right, and that's good. So, I'm really excited about this. I'll be even more excited when I can go, but that's okay. This show, we have a lot of cool things, but before we get going, I want to mention that we are authors of the books Cleaning the Kingdom, and you can get those books on our website now. Ken and I have them both signed by us, Volume 1 and 2, and you can get them on the website. We also have a special deal if you want to get both, where everything's in the price, the shipping and everything. Check that out on our website, thesweetspot.com. You can also get our books on Amazon, digital copies on Kindle and Apple Books, and the audio for the first book is on Audible, and wherever audiobooks are. I think you can find them in a couple of places. Also, we have a Patreon. If you want to help support our show, we could definitely use it. As things go up and up, we can always use the help. We have a Patreon. We do a bonus show once a month, and Ken and I always have some sort of unique way, just a real casual conversation, but we always have fun doing it. And I really think
we give out winning lottery numbers. No, we don't.
No. Yeah, we have a lot of fun doing those, and sometimes we don't even know what we're going to talk about until right before we do it. But those are some of the better shows.
Shh, don't let them know that.
No, those are actually some of the better ones that we just do them on the fly, and I enjoy that. But definitely, you can go to Patreon and search the Sweet Spot, or you can go to our website and you look for the Patreon link. If you don't want to do Patreon, you can, and I have one person that does this. You can. There's a link on our website for I was going to say Skype, for PayPal, and you can pay the $7.50 or $5, and I will email you that file. So, anyways, and email me if you have any questions about that at thesweetspot@gmail.com. All right, that's a lot. We have 3 guests tonight, and all of them worked together at one point on the Keel boats, and we'll explain
the what?
The
what
Keel.
are those?
Well, we will get into that and the interview, but we're going to have a lot of fun with these guys. I just have a feeling, and you won't want to miss this.
And people should not only listen all the way through on their segment of the show, but they should listen to the very end of the show. We always have something to say at the end of the show, so don't just, when our guests have departed and they're eating in the green room, we've still got stuff to say that you should listen to. So go ahead, don't stop listening then. All right. So,
yeah, that's the really good stuff. No. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get going on the show. Now we're going to have the current events. Ken, what do you have for us?
Well, Lynn, not much. Not much is happening. Wait, no, that's... Lynn, our long national nightmare has finally come to a close.
Wow.
Disneyland has reopened. That's right. And all is right with the world again. No, Disneyland has reopened, Lynn. And,
I know, it's amazing, right?
Oh, it's amazing. There's lots of news coverage, lots of it. But, of course, the Orange County Register covered it. Brady McDonald had quite an extensive story headlined with Disneyland reopens to the public after 13-month coronavirus closure. And it says here that Disneyland has returned after a year-long coronavirus closure with a rethemed Snow White's Enchanted Wish, updated Haunted Mansion, and refreshed King Arthur Carousel to the delight of diehard fans who waited hours to snag tickets for the reopening of the Anaheim theme park. Fans anxious to ride the wildly popular Rise of the Resistance attraction and the soon-to-change Splash Mountain Log Flume had their wish granted when Disneyland finally swung open the gates just after 8 a.m. And this is on Friday, the 30th, ending a 412-day closure forced by the COVID-19 pandemic that began in March 2020. Tears were flowing as visitors walked down Main Street USA at 8 a.m. to the familiar announcement of hello and welcome to Disneyland. Disneyland cast members lined Main Street USA to wave, applaud, and cheer as visitors returned to the park for the first time in more than a year. The Mickey and Friends and Pixar Pals parking structures, and they should, they're both parking structures, I guess. I thought they were talking about the Toy Story lot at first, but no, they're two parking structures. Opened at 6 a.m., and visitors walked to the theme parks along the tram route instead of hopping aboard the parking lot trams due to COVID-19 health and safety measures. Disneyland visitors were greeted by a new arrival procedure. Temperature screenings took place inside the Pixar Pals parking structure prior to the security checkpoint. Inside the park, COVID-19 health and safety reminders were visible everywhere. Now, I know we're going to have a little update about this later, so we will get some more details about this. But as the story here says, by 5:45 a.m., hundreds of fans were in line at the Harbor Boulevard entrance waiting for security to open and to get in line at the park entrances. Without any annual pass holders who tend to visit in shorter spurts, there were fewer people who were leaving throughout the day. Well, they were annual pass holders. They just aren't in right now. So they bought tickets to be there, and they paid a lot of money to be there. And most of these people were probably legacy pass holders.
Yeah.
They haven't been in over a year, and so they are going to stay, as much as they can, because the park's it's got limited operating hours. But most rides and attractions have some type of new COVID-19 health and safety protocols that will make the experiences slightly different. Rise of the Resistance dwelling points, quote unquote, they're called dwelling points, have been shortened in Ray's briefing room, the Star Destroyer hangar bay, and First Order prison cell to shorten the ride time from 18 minutes to 15 minutes. Rise riders stand in separate areas of the ITS transport shuttle to keep groups separated. Yeah. Aurora, Ariel, and other maskless princesses pose for photos in the Fantasy Fair Royal Theater while maintaining 12 feet of distance from visitors. Visitors can't hand their smartphones to cast members now for a photo of the whole family. You'll just have to take the selfie yourself. Well, isn't that what a selfie is? Okay. Disneyland is as they say here later in the story, like I said, it's quite an extensive story. Disneyland is essentially offering half the pre-pandemic theme park experience for the same pre-pandemic price. There are no parades, fireworks, nighttime spectaculars, or shows. Just over half the attractions and eateries are open. More than 15,000 of the 32,000 cast members who worked at the parks before the pandemic have returned to work. But Disneyland doesn't feel like half a park in the pandemic era. That's because almost nobody could do all the Disneyland in a day prior to the new normal. More than likely, you will do 2 or 3 times as much as you typically did at Disneyland before the pandemic because there are so few people in the park, and lines are relatively short by Disneyland standards, at least for the next couple of months.
Wow. It just it was exciting. I've been watching live streams, all day, and it's just been just a lot of fun to see everyone in the parks again. And like I've said, of course I'd love to be there. I can't, but just knowing the fact, and we've said this before, just knowing that people are there having fun again, making memories and all this stuff, it just makes me excited, and it feels good to know that the thing that our show is centered around has been closed for that long. We kept chugging along, but
yes, we did.
But it does help to have the park open, and it's been good. But I'm really excited that people are finally getting able to go back in there, and soon out-of-state people will be back, hopefully in the next few months. And
not if I have anything to say about it. No,
I know some people are like, I hope out-of-states never come. Well, then you probably won't have a park as much as you like.
Anaheim really needs this. As an Anaheim resident and homeowner, I am thrilled that Disneyland has reopened.
Yeah. And
hopefully someday, Orlando will benefit from, maybe they'll reopen the parks at Walt Disney World, but they just got to make sure they get the safety stuff in place there. So, the official Disney Parks blog, of course, had an entry about the reopening. So, by the way, all of these are going to be linked at our current event show notes at thesweepspot.com. We'll get these up, and you can click through for everything because there's lots of video and photos and things like that. MiceChat.com had Disneyland is back. First look at new magic and big changes by Andy Castro. They also have your essential guide to Disneyland tickets, tips, and planning from Dusty Sage. So that's in there, so that you can, be up to date on all of that. Now, the Register noted that the Disneyland employee previews offer first look inside soon-to-reopen park. That was a story that was back on the 28th, way back when Disneyland was closed. Okay, so they had cast member previews. And it says here that Disneyland and Disney California Adventure began soft opening previews for employees on Tuesday, April 27th, following the 13-month pandemic closures. Cast members they were joined by invited community members for previews that continued on Wednesday, the 28th, and Thursday, the April 29th. So that was good. That only makes sense, to have a few days where the cast members are able to go in and experience what's different and help work out any of the kinks. Now, there's some changes now besides the whole pandemic stuff, there is the Snow White changes. They've or as I've heard some people call it, weather rainbow. How Disneyland made the Snow White ride less scary and more happily ever after. And that's a Brady McDonald story in the Register. And they say that, they talked to Walt Disney Imagineering's Dave Caranci. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Caranci or Caranci. He spent the past year working with a team of Imagineers to make the renamed Snow White's Enchanted Wish attraction decidedly less scary, as the creative arm of Disney reimagined the backstory for the classic Fantasyland Dark Ride and added new scenes. Have you seen it, Lynn?
I've seen some of the videos. Yeah, it looks really nice.
It's like the entire second half of the attraction is different.
Yeah.
Because what used to happen is you used to go through the scary forest. The old hag comes up on a little boat, raft, and it's like, here, have an apple, and then you go by, you see the hologram of the apple, and then it was pretty scary, but that's all gone.
I think,
and it's.
Makes more sense. Well, I was going to say, it seems like it makes a little more sense. It sort of ended abruptly before, and I think they kind of, now it kind of finishes it off a little more.
Well, now she's, they still have the part of her transforming.
Right.
And they still have the part of her making making a poison apple, and she's going to give it to Snow White, and then all of a sudden, somehow Snow White defeats that, and then boom, now we're finding the prince.
Right.
So, But it says here, the $445,000 transformation of Snow White's Scary Adventure was announced in late 2019 and largely took place while Disneyland was closed for more than a year, blah, blah, blah. Snow White's Enchanted Wish returns when the Anaheim theme park reopens on Friday, April 30th. Now, $445,000. Okay, for what I saw, I'm guessing that figure is only the actual physical work that they had to file the permits for. My guess is it doesn't count all the design and engineering, all the meetings, because there's no way that what they did only. I'm not saying it's a completely new ride, but there's a lot. They changed several scenes entirely.
Right.
And then they also
animation in there. And Yeah.
So my guess is that figure is only counting the physical construction. It's not counting the design and the engineering. That's my guess.
Yeah, I would think so, because I would think the number would be in a couple, maybe in the million, right?
Yeah, maybe a couple million, really. The changes to the Snow White Dark Ride were designed to be moderate rather than drastic, according to Caranci. The revamped ride shouldn't feel unfamiliar to older generations of riders, but rather the same with a few additions. Snow White 3.0 adds 12 laser projection scenes with the goal of harmoniously mixing in the new special effects with the Dark Ride's traditional theatrical storytelling elements. The updated 2021 version of Snow White Dark Ride adds 50 new sculpted figures. Snow White dances with Dopey in one new scene, and that features the smell of baking apple pie wafting through the air. New shadow projections show the dwarves marching off to work in the mine while singing Hi-Ho, and Grumpy hoists a pick, and Dopey looks through giant jewels in the updated mine scene. So there's all kinds of, nice little new touches. And, you'll have to see it for yourself, either when you ride it or check out some of the online videos. I mean, there's, of course, the fan sites covered it too. Laughing Place has it. And they have a whole description of what's going on. And there's really, I'll include some of that in the show notes. I don't want to belabor that right here. Mice Chat has a first look, a ride at Disneyland's reimagined Snow White attraction. So these links, again, you can click through and click on these links to see these stories. Mice Chat also has a We're Back first look at Disneyland's Haunted Mansion updates. So as they say, our own Dusty Sage and Andy Castro were able to visit a Disneyland preview on April 27th, and they bring us these images and thoughts about enhancements to one of Disneyland's most iconic attractions. Laughing Place also has Disneyland Haunted Mansion reopens with the new home improvements. And as they point out, inside the queue, guests will notice Sleeping Beauty castle markers on the floor, some numbered to mark zones for each party to stand on before going further into the attraction. New drapes, wallpaper, and carpet have been installed throughout the lobby, but the most exciting embellishment might just be the return of the beloved April to December portrait, which I think we previously discussed that. The Register also points out Disneyland to reopen Jungle Cruise this summer after removing outdated cultural depictions. Were they ever in date? I don't know. They say they're out. I don't know if outdated is the right word. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But anyway, they say here, Disneyland Resort President Ken Potrock said on the D23 Inside Disney podcast, there's other podcasts besides ours? Anyway, that the Jungle Cruise ride will reopen this summer at the Anaheim theme park. So that's basically what the story then recaps everything we already know about the changes. LaughingPlace.com also includes that the updated Jungle Cruise to reopen this summer, and according to Ken Potrock. Now, I'm happy for Ken because he's finally president over an open Disneyland.
Yeah,
he's been Disneyland president for a year, and the park was never open.
I was thinking about him today. He was some of the media stuff that they had going on today, and he had a really hard job. I mean, he had to open up this park that had been closed for this long, and it's not an easy task, No,
it's not.
And to deal with the cast members and everything, right?
Yes, dealing with the cat. Probably the biggest part of all that was dealing with the employment situation.
Right.
If you think about it,
it's very complicated, and it's not as easy as it sounds. Like, just call them back and get them there. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
You have unions involved too, and it gets pretty.
It's a big deal, and there's people who've probably left the state or moved away, got new jobs. I mean, Mice Chat updated their everything you need to know about getting a boarding pass for Rise the Resistance. So they've updated that because the new procedure. So we'll have a link to that.
Did you see real quick? Did you see the two main changes about that? I mean, I could talk about it real quick. It's that remember the boarding groups, like when we went last February, and they only did it in the morning. They do it 2 times a day now. They do it at I think it's 12 noon. They do another one, so you get 2 chances that day to try to get it. And the other change to that whole thing is that you don't have to be in the park anymore. You can do it from your hotel or your house or whatever. So. I don't know if we talked about that last time or not, but I don't remember.
Having more than one time to get boarding groups was something that I remember suggesting.
Yeah.
That they should save some of it for later in the day, because otherwise, not everybody's going to get there. And I know there's people who say you snooze, you lose, but come on, not everybody's going to be able to get there first thing in the morning.
Right.
So,
I think, and it's good because some people have technical difficulties or trying to figure it out, and they get all nervous. Well, they get a second shot at it again. So I don't know. I think that's a good thing to do, and I don't think that'll ever go away. And on their app, if you've looked at the new Disneyland app, there's a spot on there that's for virtual queues, and it's plural. So there may be a day where that's the thing that they have now, and I'm sure that it wouldn't be as hard to get. Say if they did virtual queue for Indy, like I don't think that it would be as hard to get that as it would be for Rise of Resistance. But I don't know. We'll see. But I think they're definitely going to go in that direction. Not for every attraction, but maybe for maybe the top 5, 6 attractions that they have there. Anyhow.
Yeah. We'll have to see how everything shakes out. So they do point out another Orange County Register story that Disneyland to launch new annual pass program this year. And it said here that Disneyland Resort President Ken Potrock said on the D23 Inside Disney podcast, why didn't he say it here? Anyway, that the new membership program for the Anaheim theme park will be launched this year. And that's basically, the story, except that Disneyland officials won't say how many people have annual passes. But theme park industry observers have estimated the number to be 1 million. Annual pass holders comprise an estimated 50% of Disneyland attendance, according to UBS financial analysts. Wow. So, I mean, what kind of program will it be? We'll have to see,
we spoke about that on our last mini episode.
Definitely give that a listen. The most recent mini episode to see where I'm actually a special guest star on that episode.
That's true,
so give it a listen, and we go over the history and the possible future of the annual pass holder program. Now here's something, time to sell more churros, because the Register also had this story that Disneyland Resort faces $4 billion revenue loss due to the coronavirus closure, analyst warns. And they say that the Disneyland Resort has lost an estimated $4.3 billion in revenue during the 412-day closure, according to MoffettNathanson founding partner Michael Nathanson. So the Disneyland Resort generated an estimated $3.8 billion in revenue in 2019, according to Nathanson. That works out to approximately $10.4 million in daily revenue generated by the Disneyland Resort.
Wow.
In a 2019 study by Cal State Fullerton's Woods Center for Economic Analysis and Forecasting found that the Disneyland Resort added $8.5 billion annually to the Southern California economy. That means that the closure of Disneyland could have cost the Southern California economy as much as $23 million a day, or nearly $10 billion. Wow. So, Anaheim's feeling it, I tell you. And probably nearby cities besides Anaheim, too.
Yeah.
Disneyland Resort celebrates cast members marking 50 and 55 years of service. And this one comes from Laughing Place. It says, the Disneyland Resort recently celebrated 7 cast members who marked 50 years of service in 2020, and one who marked 55 years with an award ceremony in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle. Those celebrating 50 years of service include Bob Rambode, who's in safety services. He did spend some time in custodial.
Yeah, I remember him.
There's David Gifford of night custodial. He's actually retired now. Diane Alvarez, who's a vacation planner. Jan Fleener, who's a vacation planner. Jim Vash, who's in entertainment and also just retired. Christy Stevenson, who's with parking. Leanna Shibata, vacation planner. Malu Park, who's in parking, and Mike Berry of Hungry Bear, who's a Hungry Bear busser who just retired, and Richard Ruiz, who's a Main Street busser. So we've worked with a lot of these people.
Yeah, I remember Richard, yeah.
Celebrating 55 years is Larry Snow, Snowman of Custodial, Day Custodial Sweeping.
We remember him, yeah. And
it says that he's
big fan of our books.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of our books. He loves them. He says, write a third one. He says he'll be marking 56 years at Disneyland Custodial in May, and was given a specially designed statuette featuring Disney characters around his photo. Oh. So, not a photo of Oscar from Carnation, I guess, but let's see. The Register also covered something I believe we talked about last time, which was Disneyland relaxes employee beard restrictions to sneezy, sleepy, and grumpy lengths.
Wow.
So they talk about the updated Disney look guidelines.
That could be dangerous.
The updated gender-inclusive Disney look guidelines state that hair length is now at the discretion of Disneyland cast members. Hair below the shoulder length should be secured if it falls forward over the face or covers the employee's name tag. Blue, green, pink, purple, and other unnatural hair colors are prohibited. Disneyland cast members are permitted to shave lines or shapes in their hair or beard, provided the designs do not depict offensive words or symbols.
What?
Again, how are we, are Disneyland managers all hip to all the symbols? I foresee when you have it open into interpretation, there's just going to be problems. All Disneyland cast members can don headwear for religious purposes. Yeah. So there's going to be some people wearing spaghetti strainers. That's going to happen. Maybe not.
Wow.
All references to gender have been eliminated from the Disney look guidelines. Mm-hmm. Under the changes to the guidelines, all cast members can show up to work in the gender-inclusive costume of their choosing. So that was the, like I said, I think we talked about that last time, but the Register got around to covering that. So if you want to read more, I think it explains a little bit better about what's happening. But it's exciting. The park is reopened, Lynn. It's reopened.
I can't believe it.
Reservations are needed, and there's all kinds of new ways of doing things. So not only is Disneyland reopened, but I can't believe it, Walt Disney World is also reopened. It reopened months and months ago. And there's Disney's Aulani in Hawaii. So how about planning your next getaway Disney vacation? Contact our travel planning partners, Concierge. Check out concierge.com at concierrs.com. They are keeping up to date on everything, including plans for the Disney Cruise Line and Adventures by Disney. So let Concierge do the heavy lifting to plan your Disney getaway vacation. It's not going to cost you anymore. It'll just make things a whole lot easier for you. Contact concierge.com. Book a vacation package with them, including a hotel stay and theme park tickets and whatever else you want to add in. And tell them that the Sweep Spot sent you, and you'll get a special gift. Okay, concierge.com, like mouse ears and concierge, concierge.com. Check them out and tell them the Sweep Spot sent you. All right, and now we actually have somebody who experienced Disneyland as it is renewed. So let's get that person to patch in live and give us an update.
All right, let's do it. All right, we're going to go live with Dusty Sage down at Disneyland, actually. Hey, Dusty.
That place. Okay, good. Yes. Hey, Dusty, how's it going?
Hello. You say alive, and I feel like I'm in Technicolor right now.
Exactly.
I mean, to be back at Disneyland after a year and a little over a month, and wow, and it looks better now than it did before the shutdown. It's incredible.
Really?
Good.
It's just incredible to be here. Yeah, I love it.
What's the vibe like there with everyone, including the cast members?
This is a special time because yesterday was a cast member preview, and I got to be there. So it's the very first preview. And I'm back again today for a second preview. The cast members are amazing because they work here, right? So thrilled to be back, and then they get a day of play, and they're bringing their friends and family. And so you hear a lot of people doing like what I do. They're telling people what stuff is, and I used to work over there with so-and-so, and then there was the day Bob Iger came in. So, they tell these stories because they're cast members.
Yeah.
So it's a very different vibe than it will be on Friday when the regular guests are back for the first time. So I really am digging it because I'm not necessarily the smartest guy about Disney in the park, and I love that, So It's been really neat. And I've got to talk to a lot of cast members about what it's been like for them for the last year and whether or not they're excited to be back, and it's magical.
That's so cool. What was your feelings when you first walked in for the first time yesterday? Was it emotional?
So I thought about it in advance because my whole staff is going on Friday, and some of them were saying things like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go without crying, or I'm going to bring tissues.
Yeah.
And thinking to myself, why would they cry? I mean, I've been to Disneyland maybe thousands of times.
Right.
And before the shutdown, I mean, it's my job to be here. So there might be weeks where I was at the park 5 days in a week, and or at other parks. And so how could I possibly get emotional? I'll be excited, but will I be emotional? I walked in the gate, and up and down Main Street on both sides, it was lined with cast members and suits and people from Team Disney Anaheim. They had emptied that building, you could tell. Every manner of employee lining that street, and as we walked in, they were cheering.
Oh.
And I'm starting to get choked up talking about
That's
it.
Right.
Because you could tell how excited they really were to be there and to see people in the park again.
Yeah.
But here's what got me. I looked over to my right, and there was the VP of the park, and Chris Tyler. She's an amazing lady, engineer from the Midwest, ends up running Disneyland. She's an incredible woman. And she looks over and sees me, and she shouts out, Dusty! And she got a tear in her eye. Like, oh, my God, there's a fan. We have a fan.
Yeah.
It's not just employees. We have one of our fans. And then I started crying.
Yeah.
And I didn't stop for about half an hour.
Wow.
So I went from, why would anybody cry going to Disneyland, to here I am, just steps into the park. and I had tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I've had a few moments like that throughout. There was an old lady in a wheelchair yesterday.
Yeah.
She had been a cast member for many years, and her daughter now works in the park. And her mother, the lady in the wheelchair, said to her daughter, I'm so glad I get to see Disneyland one more time.
Oh, wow.
And you realize that every visit to Disneyland is somebody's first time, but it's also somebody's last time.
Yeah.
And it's special.
Very true.
And memories are made here. People work here, sure. People meet their, significant other here, or they had the best time of their life here, or they had that great grad night here. There are memories. And it represents a lot to a lot of people.
For sure. And I think this year and a half being away from it just shows how important it is to people in their lives,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And, I've heard so little grumbling. I mean, we're all in masks. We're physical distancing. Lines for food are long. Lines for rides are short. You can hear, I'm right at Splash Mountain right now.
Oh, yeah.
Have a zippity-doo-dah ride. So that's what you're hearing in the background. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of rides are closed. I mean, there's negative stuff.
Yeah.
But nobody's complaining about it because everybody's so happy to be here.
Right.
And that's magical, because normally if there's anything wrong at Disney, somebody's lining up in guest relations to complain, right? Not the last 2 days. It's just been nothing but, oh, look how great this is, or can you believe this is only a 5-minute wait?
Yeah.
I rode Big Thunder yesterday. There wasn't a single person in front of me. I got on the train, one other party loaded on the whole train.
Wow.
In the middle of the day.
Yeah.
How can you complain about that? It's just amazing. It's a great opportunity. So it's super expensive to come here right now.
Yeah.
It's at what they call Tier 5 pricing, which is their highest level. But what would you be willing to pay to be in the park and not have to wait for anything?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I was watching your live stream, and you walked right on Big Thunder Mountain tonight. So
that was tonight. Yeah, yesterday was even fewer people.
Oh, okay.
And yesterday there were more people in the park than today. And I will say, don't follow the crowds, because there are so few people here, but everybody tends to want to do things at the same time.
Yeah.
So they get into the park and they're like, what's new? Let's go ride Snow White, because it's all new.
Right.
And the line is like all the way through the castle. But right next door is Peter Pan, and there wasn't one person in the queue. And so I went and rode Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, to ride Peter Pan without a wait. And then later Peter Pan had a wait, and there was a short wait for Snow White. So do whatever people aren't doing.
Well,
and that's kind of the key.
Have you had a chance to use the mobile ordering or anything yet?
You have to do it.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was with a cast member, and they get a discount, and we were going to eat someplace kind of expensive, and she's like, oh, let's go here. You know, I get this. I have this 50% discount voucher. I'm like, great. She said, unfortunately, I can't use it with mobile order. Oh. So we had to go and get in line, and the line was 45 minutes long because there's only one person taking in-person orders because they want you to mobile order.
Right.
Yeah.
So today when I got to the park, I'll tell you, before I got to the park, 7 o'clock in the morning you can make your Ride to the Resistance pass reservation from home. So you don't need to be in the park anymore. And then as soon as I was done that, I got a boarding pass, no problem. First time ever, by the way.
Wow.
I never get lucky, but no problem. I got boarding group 45.
Nice.
And then I made my mobile order from home. So by the time I got to the park, I'd already made my lunch reservation. I had a boarding pass for Rise to the Resistance. My day was set.
Wow.
I didn't have to worry about really anything else for the whole day. So I would say yes, mobile order.
Okay.
But my tip on mobile order is still pick a time either before or after that main lunch rush from 11:30 a.m. until like 1. Because it does still take them time to prepare your order.
Right.
I set mine for 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I thought, well, I'm going to be doing live streams and stuff, so what if, you know, I'm in the middle of my live stream? So I picked 3 and then ended up not doing my live stream until after because of some technical difficulties. But I clicked the little button for I'm here, and immediately they sent me a text message saying, pick up your order.
Wow.
So by the time I actually got there to my restaurant, they had my order waiting in a little paper bag, and she said, you know, are you Dusty? And I'm like, yes. And she said, here you go. So it was great.
Nice. Wow. Well, you know, we could probably talk a lot longer, but what do you have any tips or anything you want to say before we go for people coming out?
Well, I will say one thing. So Disneyland is, you know, a little over 65 years old.
Yeah.
And during all that time, all you had to do was buy a ticket and you could go. That has changed. You now buy a ticket, but then you have to book a park reservation. So they limit, you know, just a certain number of people can be in the park each day. So first you buy your ticket. You need a valid ticket before you can make a park reservation. And then you need that park reservation before you can visit the park. But not everybody's going to know that because who would think to check?
Yeah.
You know, if you live in, you know, someplace far away from the park, but you're in California and, you know, you go once a year or once every other year, all you know is that you go to the grocery store and maybe buy a ticket or Costco and buy a ticket, and then you show up. So on Friday and after, I suspect there will be thousands of people showing up who do not have a park reservation.
Yeah.
So that's my number one for everybody. Above anything else, make sure you actually have a reservation.
Okay.
And then there were people that thought they had reservations because the tickets had a date on them for some people, depending on how they bought them.
Right.
Unless it says you have a park reservation for Disneyland or California Adventure or a park hopper, you don't. Yeah, so double check.
Very important.
Before you go. Yeah, it could really ruin your trip.
Yes.
I have one last question for you, and that is, had you ever gone this long without visiting Disneyland?
No, never. The hardest year of my life because, you know, I'm not just a Disney fan. I'm a blogger, and my whole life revolves around Disney because aside from blogging about Disney, I run Walt Disney's Mansion in the Hollywood Hills. I saved Walt Disney's birthplace in Chicago. I run Dick Van Dyke's Foundation for the Performing Arts. I run a consultancy that provides support, marketing, PR for theme parks and theme park design companies. So literally everything I do has something to do in some way with Disney or theme parks. And then for a whole year it shut down, and I was like, oh, what do I do? And I branched out. I mean, ultimately we evolved, and we found ways. Every single day of the pandemic, we wrote articles, and someday we had 2 or 3 articles.
Yeah.
I think we wrote more about Disney in the year that it was closed than we do normally when it's open. So, but it was tough there for a little while. I'm like, oh my God, who am I? What am I? You know, real identity crisis. And push through it, and like everyone else, you evolve or you die.
Yeah.
So we evolved. And now I feel like I'm going to be too busy because not only are the parks open and I can write about the parks again, but now I write about all this other stuff, that people want to know about. I'm writing about animation and merchandise and cruise lines and other theme parks, and it's going to be busy from now on. So if somebody out there that writes really well, contact me because I'm hiring.
There you go, Ken.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right.
Finally, Ken, you got a real job.
That's right. Finally. Oh, boy.
Well,
thank you for checking in with us.
Oh, my goodness, guys. It is so great to hear your voices. I love the show. Huge fan, as you know.
Yeah.
And it's my pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Well, enjoy your time, and I'll be watching those live streams.
Please do.
Right.
Keep watching.
All right.
See you all again soon.
Bye, Dusty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, howdy hey to all you pioneers, buccaneers, souvenirs, chandeliers, mouseketeers, in-laws, outlaws, grandmas, grandpas, big ones, tall ones, short ones, small ones, engine fighters, and wild horse riders. And especially I find howdy do to all you lovely, lovely ladies. And all you other ladies, too. Welcome aboard the Mike Think Keel Boats. This here's the Gullywumper. Looks like everyone's loaded, so here we go.
Three former Keel Boat skippers. Skippers, is that what they called?
More or less.
More or less, yeah. Drivers? Okay.
Skippers of that other ride.
Exactly. Same thing, right? No. So
it's less good because they don't drive their boats.
Yes.
Exactly. So we have three on, and I wanted to introduce each one. First, we have Brian. When I introduce your name, maybe just tell everyone when you started at Disneyland and when you left. Brian?
Yes. So I'm Brian Carlson. I worked West Side attractions from 1987 to 1990, all during college.
Cool. And Davey?
Davey Brown here. I started at Disneyland in 1992 and left in 1999. Also was kind of a college job that kind of went for 7 years-ish.
I hear you. And James?
Yeah, James Wilson, and I worked from 86 to 96. My first weekend working was the opening of Star Tours weekend, and I worked in foods at Village House in Fantasyland from 86 to 89, and then transferred to Attractions West from 89 to 96. So I kind of did both.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like when you said, because I know, we're familiar with all the, West Side and all that stuff, but you weren't only Keel Boat drivers, you were also trained on other attractions, right, guys?
Yes.
Correct.
Right. So was Keel Boats a seasonal thing at the time, or was it year-round?
Yeah. When I got trained in 87, it was definitely seasonal, and so they would open it literally just for Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring break, and summer, and then some weekends, but certainly not every weekend throughout the year.
Yeah, I think there was a park capacity limit to open the Keel Boats, like Columbia, same thing.
I don't even think I was born in 1987, by the way.
Well,
yeah, that's one thing about the three of us is we are all online friends, and we've seen each other at the Disney West Side and New Orleans reunions, but all the three of us are pretty sure that none of us actually worked with each other.
I worked with Jim. I know Jim actually trained me on the Keel Boats.
Okay, well, I'll take that back then.
Yeah, Dave worked the same time I did.
Oh, okay. Wow. So was Keel Boat? Was it any of your? Was it like your first attraction, or what was some of the attractions also that you worked on? That goes for anyone.
Here, I worked everything on the west side. So I worked Splash, Pirates, canoes, Keel Boats, rafts,
Wow.
Everything. The big house, all the good stuff. West Side, by the way, is the best place to work.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, we say West Side is the best side. For me, I went to college about an hour and 15 minutes away, and so I only was there seasonally, so I didn't work the weekends like a lot of the OC guys would do. So I actually got trained on Haunted Mansion first, and after about a week of that, one of the schedulers called me at home and said, "Hey, Brian, can you swim?" And I said, "Yes, why?" And he said, "Oh, never mind. I just put you down for Keel Boat training starting in 2 days." So Keel Boats was my second attraction.
Wow.
And it turned out to be my favorite. Later on, I ended up on the opening crew for Splash. So my last summer there, I was actually on Splash way more than Keel Boats, but it was by far my favorite.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I transferred over, I don't think anyone did Keel Boats first. I think that's a lot of responsibility for driving the boat and stuff. They probably train you on something regular like Pirates or something. Plus,
I had Country Bear was my first thing.
Yeah, Country Bear.
With Tom Ravenscroft.
Oh, Tom Ravenscroft. There's a name. Holy cow. Such a great guy. Yeah, and then I got trained as a trainer on Keel Boats. And so I trained people, and it was basically me and John Prentice training for a long time until it closed, basically. I think some of the other... Davey, were you a trainer?
Not on the Keel Boats. I was on canoes and rafts and all that stuff as a trainer.
Yeah, and it was great. I really, really wanted to work Keel Boats. I saw it from the canoes. I really wanted to, and kept bugging the schedulers to put me on it, and they finally did. Probably shut me up.
Less paddling.
For sure.
If you guys were if you worked the opening crew for Splash Mountain, then you probably actually would know me by sight.
Oh,
because I was like 16 years old, and we just got in line over and over and over again to ride it because we were pass holders who had ridden everything else.
Sure.
And I was obsessed with the construction of the darn thing. So when it finally opened, we would get in line and ride it, and then get back in line and ride it again. And you know, so you probably would know me by sight.
That's funny.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So another funny story about the Splash opening is Brian and his wife both worked with my aunt, Debbie Schiller, at the time, who was also on the opening crew.
Wow.
Nice.
Yep. And then, and then Debbie's husband is Lou.
Barron, yep.
And
that's
then
my uncle.
That's your uncle, right? So Lou was one of the guys working Keel Boats when I first started, and then he rotated out pretty soon after I got trained with some of the older generation, kind of the post-college guys that were sick of it by then.
Yep.
It's a small world, all this connection.
It's literally a small world. We all use that pun way too much, but in this case, it totally is an inbred small world of everybody knowing each other. Yep. But, Davey was just starting into saying, I think, something that the three of us really can resonate with, and that is a lot of guys really hated the Keel Boats, and there's a few reasons for that. One is it was very difficult to remember not only a basic spiel, but a combination of them so that you didn't say the same thing over to different people that heard you unloading a boat right before they got on.
Yeah.
And then the driving was extremely difficult, being the last right of way on the river. And one of the worst obstacles was the fact that all the girls were going down to hang out at the canoe dock and bypassing the Keel Boat dock because we did not look very good in these really bad brown pants and calico shirts.
Speak for yourself.
Well, you know.
well, tell people. Okay, we're familiar with the Keel Boats, and I really enjoyed the attraction. But just give a brief overview to our listeners who, some of them were born after the Keel Boat stopped running.
Yeah.
So give it a brief overview of what we're even talking about.
That's probably a good one for James to take.
Yeah. So it comes out of the old 1950s Davy Crockett with Fess Parker movies, and he was really popular in the first Davy Crockett movie, but they killed him at the end at the Alamo, like he's supposed to. And so they went on and made, a prequel, which is, before Star Wars made that famous, back in the 1810s. And he was in a keelboat race with Mike Fink. And then they brought that to the park when it opened. And so this attraction has been there, from the beginning. and the boats have been upgraded and whatever. And so you go to the Keel Boat dock, which is right next to the rafts, and directly across from the Haunted Mansion. You get in these boats that are 2-story boats, and there's like 20 people on top in the open deck, and then 20 down below in these cabins. And you stand on the very back behind that big cabin. You can't see anything. There's these little slits to look through to see like directly in front of the boat. And you go Jungle Cruise style around the river, and there's scenes of Native American life and Indians and whatever, and tell the jokes similar to Jungle Cruise jokes, and some of them even overlapped, and then come back. And it was a really great ride because the boat is free floating, and you drove it. You were on a keel and drove that thing. And like Brian said, we had the least right away, so we had to, wait for everybody basically. But even though we had the least right away, we had the biggest egos and attitudes. And so, some mischief happened out there. Because big, powerful boats that if you really drove them right, you could swamp canoes and all kinds of things with it. And, some of the guys that worked on it a lot, like me and John and Dave, we were really good at putting those boats, these giant boats, right where we wanted them to go. And it took a lot of skill to do that. And each boat had its own flavor. You had to know the boat.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Bertha May would pull really hard to the left.
Exactly. And the Gully powerhouse. That thing was a monster.
The Gully Wumper had a lot of power, but you also had to make sure you started putting in reverse a little early because it could drift.
Yeah, and it didn't turn, I don't think, as sharp as the Bertha, but the Bertha was my favorite by far.
Wow. So at one point there was a lot of traffic on. Now I'm thinking about it, it's like maybe on a busy weekend you have Columbia, Mark Twain, the canoes, keelboats, and the rafts. It's like wow.
So and 3 rafts, 10 canoes, 2 big boats, and 2 keelboats.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting, and it was hard to keep the keelboats stopped in one place while you're waiting for the dock to clear up. And
yes.
Yeah.
And you'd get sucked over to the side depending on what undercurrent was going on based on which big boat just passed by. And if you were sitting there, out by the rafts waiting to get into dock because the other keel boat was slow leaving, you'd end up having to pull out your top hat and cane and figure out something new to say to these people when you weren't moving and there was nothing interesting to look at.
Yep. And then if you drifted into the seawall or something or some trees, they had these big poles on the side of the boat that you'd have to get out and push the push poles to get you loose and get you back out in the river.
Yeah.
Speaking of those poles, I remember seeing pictures of, like the push off, and some of the guys are literally like horizontal, like out pushing. Did anyone ever fall in doing that?
Oh yeah.
I think Davey might have taken a couple swims.
I've been in the river a few times. I've actually got 3 eyes and 4 arms now. It's kind of crazy.
Yep.
Well, we have to explain. We got to explain why that even happened, because the dock, in recent years it was a smoking area, but the dock was really close to the maintenance dock for the large boats, and so to clear that, the operator on the shore would have to use this pole to push the front of the boat so far away from the dock, so so that you could clear it.
Well, the trick there was we were all trained to be able to take the boat off by ourselves without a push.
Yep.
And if you were going to gun it and really go into reverse pretty far out and then get into forward, you could just do it that way, but not if any rafts were around, which they usually were around. Or you could take it really light and pivot back off the corner of the dock by yourself without the push. But the thing for the 3 of us on here is I'm sure we were all the same kind of driver where it was more fun to let the guy get a good push off on dock. So you would just take it a little bit back and put it into complete neutral, and you'd just be sitting there not moving at all. And then the guy could lean as far as he wanted and just put your nose out.
Yep.
And the one picture, there's a couple of pictures of the 60s with guys kind of leaning backward onto the pole. The one that you've seen of the one with Columbia in the dock and the guy almost horizontal is actually me. And I actually never fell in, but I came close quite a few times because once in a while the guy driving would decide to play a joke and back it up while I was leaning.
Yeah. You can never trust a keel boater, that's for sure.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the big key there is that you're pushing off with that boat hook, and that the little end of that hook there is also what you're catching the rope when the ride is done. You're pushing off, and you got to make sure that that little hook is faced up. If it's face down, you're going to grab the edge of that keel boat and get pulled in.
Yes.
I've heard. So, like Brian was talking about, that whole time where you're kind of sitting there and that your dock mate is pushing off. We've got, you could do a 10-minute riff of just making fun of that guy.
Yep.
So we would have a great time of just making fun of that person, making fun of the rafts, making fun of the guests at that time. Just as we're backing out, you could spend 10 minutes of your day just backing out of the dock.
Yep. And one thing that guests and other cast members would never even know unless you've been trained on the ride is another layer of trickiness to running it. And that is there were 3 places on the river that a keel boat could be in rotation with the other boats. So it wasn't just random where we would take off where we wanted. You were either leaving when the Twain bells rang for the Twain to leave, so you're staying a certain distance ahead of the Twain, or you're leaving before the Columbia leaves, which means you have to watch it because it doesn't have any bells. Or back in the old days when the Columbia would do 2 cannon shots, that was actually to tell the keel boat that they could leave and stay at a slow distance behind the Columbia without coming up on it. But what I've just described is 3 spots in rotation, but there were only 2 keel boats. And so when you were in the dock, mentally you had to be ready to move up into the next spot into rotation. So you would always be you'd be in front of the Twain, in front of the Columbia, and then behind the Columbia in that order. And so what I'm getting at here is if you're behind the Columbia, you're stuck in dock while it passes by the whole New Orleans area. Yep. And that's what Davey is saying. You got to have 10 minutes worth of material, ask all those guests what state they're from. You have all kinds of jokes about, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Missouri. Oh, Misery, you said? Misery, right? Or, oh, I'm from Washington. Oh, AC or DC? AC above California. And then you would point up and say, you see that big yellow thing up there? Well, that's called the sun. Just dumb stuff. And they would just be moaning and groaning. And then 10 minutes later, you could finally leave.
Oh, my gosh.
The dock was a magical place. We're talking about sitting there and you can pull your tiller out and you can kind of pull away, pull back in.
Yes.
That part was, right? We're all 18 to 22 years old, so we're flirting with all the girls that are working on the rafts and everything else. And if there's somebody fairly new that's on the rafts and they're not quite power landing, so let's go back to a power landing. So when you're at the dock, you got the keel boat parked, you've got the tiller that's got a rope that's attached to the stanchions on the side there that keeps it in place. That's what's going to keep your guests from not falling over. So your engine is actually in full speed at that point. And when that happens, that creates a gigantic current that blows directly back at the rafts. So if you've got some new raft folks as they're crossing towards the mainland dock, if they're not coming in nose first to the dock, all you're going to do is keep blowing them out into the river, which was awesome.
Yep.
And then you have something to talk about.
Totally.
Yep.
And then you get all the guests to turn around and point and laugh at them and stuff. It was good.
Yes. One of my favorite things, and I don't know if you two other guys ever had this one, but one of my summers, keel boats I was in the keel boat rotation. I mean, that was my summer pick. And so I was there, 5-6 days a week. And then we would be with the same raft people. And there were a couple girls who would always like to be the bow person on the raft, like pushing it off, doing the ropes. And so if I was stuck in the keel boat dock and the raft was pushing off, I would say, hey, everybody, turn around, look at that raft over there. Look at Diana. Look at her push that raft off. Look at that grace. Look at the agility, the extension. And then I would say, let's give her a big hand, and they would applaud. And I would say, I haven't seen legs like that since the Miss America pageant. And everybody would go, oh. And then I would say, or wait, was it the Kentucky Derby? And then... But the girls knew that we were going to say that, and so they would have these big smiles on their face and then pretend to be all upset about it after we called them a horse. And it was just this like boat-to-boat little gag that we had going, and the guests just thought it was hilarious.
So how many were on each boat? Was it just one cast member?
Just one.
Just one, unless there was training.
Yep.
Right. And then someone on the dock there, or
yep.
Yeah.
One on the boat, one on the dock, one on a break. It was the best rotation in all of Disneyland.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You figure you get a break every half an hour to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless, in the hot summer, especially July and August, you'd be like, oh man, I just took 3 and I'm ready for my bump. And then just when you pull away, you look back at the dock and the guy is coming that was supposed to relieve you off of the boat. It's like, gosh dang it.
Same on canoes, man. Remember sitting back there on the old ping pong table and you're just kind of waiting because your guys maxing on their break, and then they come out from behind Hungry Bear just as you happen to be coming out, and they give you that like hands in the air like, oh man, I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. 30 seconds.
But how rough was life back then that our rough day was we had to go another 8 minutes around the river?
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys needed breaks frequently because if you're operating the boat itself, right? And you have to steer it. It's not on a track, right?
Correct.
And you've also got a spiel, and you've got to pay attention to the other watercraft, and just there's a bunch of you got to make sure the guests aren't standing up or doing something they're not supposed to be doing.
Yep.
It's there's a lot going on.
And on top of all that other stuff I was telling you before about thinking about how you're going to slip into the next spot in rotation, you've also got to be listening to the radio because you might be out there and they could be telling you the Columbia just broke down and you got to figure out how to unload your guests and go tow it.
Yep.
Exactly.
There's all kinds of that stuff going on.
Right. There was a practical, the keel boats weren't just used for show. There was actually practical applications to the park operations.
Yeah, we were the tugs at the time.
Yeah.
I think we used to do tow training once a year, maybe once every before summer.
Yep, it was great.
Yep.
And then Fantasmic came with their fancy outboard motor boats, and that ended that. So
I've got 500 horsepower. Look at me.
Yep,
yeah.
No, whatever.
Exactly.
So Jim was talking about the breaks. We had 3 in the rotation, or 4 if we had 2 boats going. But personally, I loved that ride so much that most of the days I would forego my breaks.
Yeah.
For keel boats, for me, it was such a good time in making the guests laugh.
Yep.
But bigger for me was making the other cast members laugh.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was the best part was trying to make your other cast members break.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it was coming up with, especially with John Prentice and Jim and Mike Real, Chongo, and Miles Phillips. And, it's the who's of who at keel boats back in the early 90s, but it was just trying to make each other laugh. If the guests got something out of it, great. But for the rest of us, it was just awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, we had pranks, and I'm going to tell one, and I'm sure James has another one too, but the best prank for me was, especially if somebody was new off of training and he was on the dock, while you're out on the river, you tell everybody on your boat that either it's his birthday or he just got engaged. And so the boat pulls in and you're doing your unload spiel. And meanwhile, everybody is getting off that boat and high-fiving the guy or telling him happy birthday or congratulations. And he's just like standing there with his eyes wide open, like, what's happening? And those kinds of things were really funny to play on rookies and sometimes just on unsuspecting old-timers too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my favorite, very rare joke or whatever was at the end of training days for the new trainee. And so after we would get done training them and make sure they could drive well and tell the jokes and everything and were safe, we'd sign them off basically officially, and then we'd say, we're taking our trip here, and I'd get on the front of the boat, the keel boat, and they'd pull out and they wouldn't see the trainer like me jump off the front of the boat onto the dock, and I'd hide behind the big boxes that were on the dock. And so they'd take a trip thinking the trainer's still on the boat, but in fact they're alone. And then they would come back to dock, and the trainer would be standing on the dock, and we'd tell everybody, this guy is coming in for his first solo trip, and everybody would cheer. And then one of the dock hand would pull his hat off, his big old cowboy hat, and we do the keel boat ceremony that was to initiate someone into being a keel boater, and throw the hat on the ground and dance around it, and then someone would stomp on the hat in the middle of the hat and put it on their head all crushed, and then we'd send them out again for another trip with their crushed hat.
Yep.
So the funny part about that is for the 2 days of the training is you would tell your trainee that they should style their hat however they like. Right? So they're forming it on their brakes.
Yep.
They've got their hands, they're curving the sides. They're making it their own hat. And then you just stomp the hell out of it.
Yeah, it's very temporary. So these guys were just mentioning 2 days of training, and there's something I need to fess up on. I required 3 days of training because I was absolutely dismal at this as a college freshman, 18 years old, 6'3", probably 160, had to run around in the shower to get wet.
Yep.
Not very confident, and I was crappy. I was a horrible driver, and I was so worried about it that I couldn't even focus on the jokes. And so my trainer, I still owe him a beer if I ever run into him. It was Bill Muckenthaler. He had to do a third day because he was not confident signing me off. And so I had to have a third day. I finally got signed off. And then my first day off of training, I was so bad. At the end of the day, it was just me and the guy on the dock. I came in so hot that if he hadn't flipped that rope onto the post to stop me, I would have hit the Columbia. And I had 2 people on the bow seat. And so he threw the rope over. It snapped because I was going so fast, but it stopped my momentum. But there's like rope smoke all flying in the air, and all the guests like gasped and basically ran off of that boat. So the next shift I had the next day, Bill Hillis, who was one of our supervisors, he called me up to the office during my lunch, and he asked me if I would like to have keel boats removed from my job knowledge. But he asked me, he didn't tell me. And something in me said, you know what? I'm going to stick with this. I can do this. And it took me quite a few weeks and a good part of that first summer. But by the next summer, I mean, I just felt like my soul was on the river. I just loved that attraction. And all these years later, here I am happily talking about it because I stuck with it. And so I actually thanked Bill a few months ago when he retired for just wording it just that way for me back as a nervous 18-year-old, because it really made a difference for me.
That's awesome. It only took me an hour to learn it, but that's cool.
Yeah, well, you're a boat boy. I mean, you're still on boats, for God's sakes.
That's a good point.
You know, like similarly, I was 17 when I started working there, I think, and or maybe just turned 18. And I was pretty young when I learned keel boats, and I was a nerd, and I was really introverted and all this kind of stuff and shy. And but I still wanted to work keel boats. And when I went there were these 2 guys there, Matt and Adam. So Adam Flasher and Matt Whiteside, I think.
Matt Whiteside, yeah.
Yeah, and these 2 guys were just like Mr. Cools and really sure of themselves. And
Gaston.
Yeah, and
yes,
exactly.
Adam is Gaston.
Exactly. And I was there, and I was like trying to be funny, and I just sucked. I was so flat and crappy. And I really looked to these guys to try and be like them and kind of emulate them. And I recently, like you, reached out to them and sent them a message on Facebook and said, hey, dudes, thanks for, like giving me crap and heckling me and stuff like that, because it really motivated me. And now that I'm a professor, like my sense of humor from the keel boats and jungle and all that and Disney training for public speaking has really, really helped. And my lectures have that humor and everything in them. And it's because of those 2 guys, like just really kind of, they weren't mean or anything, but they really kind of, made fun of you until you like brought it up to where it should be.
Yeah, Adam was mean to me. And I told him that. At Carl Wickhouse's 50th birthday a couple years ago, because Adam comes in not quite as buff as he used to be. I'm a little more buff than I used to be. We're both standing there with shaved heads, not looking anything like we did 30 years ago. I just went right up to him and we're chatting, and I said, you know what? I was scared of you when we were on those boats. And he's like, oh my gosh, seriously? But for some of us, that was a real turning point. Now, for people like Davey, who are a natural ham, I mean, you were probably in your element from the minute you stepped on that dock. But you grew up on the dock, right? Because of Lou and some of those other guys.
Exactly. I was just going to say, like, you're talking Adam and these guys. I used to play paintball with Adam. I was part of that Mickey's Jihad team way back when we did the Paintball World Series up in San Francisco and all that stuff. But I've known most of those guys since I was about 10 years old when Lou started. So, Dan Salvatore and Shepard, and, all these different guys who, Lou and those guys, they used to party. They called it the mansion all the time. I was 10 to 12 years old when I started going to hang out with these guys. So I knew all these guys, and I was accepted pretty quickly. And I think that was always a political thing because I learned all of the rides probably within my first 3 months at the park, which was kind of nuts.
Yep.
But it was awesome. It was great knowing these guys. I was welcomed in pretty quick. I was pretty young on the canoes with these dudes, but they all had my back pretty fast, which was kind of fun. Otherwise, Lou would beat them up.
Right.
Yeah. Was management pretty laid back when it came to you guys because they just knew that you were kind of messing around or not?
Well, the thing with keel boats is, at maximum crew, unless there was a trainer with trainees, it would be 4 people max, and so we didn't have our own foreman. So we were lumped in with the raft dock foreman. Oh. And so depending on who that foreman was or who was on the keel boat dock, if it was like Mike Real and the 3 of us on this call, nobody would ever have to even go to that dock to make anything, check on anything. We were fine. But sometimes you would have somebody who was a hot dogger and would be taking way too fast to trips and show up too early, and there was nowhere for the boat to be with the Columbia coming or other issues. And it just kind of depended on if somebody was there who was having a rough time or just didn't care versus kind of the diehards who really knew what was going on. It's just kind of luck of the draw on the scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, it's all fun and games until you T-bone a canoe.
Yes. Well, I do, and Davey could probably chime in because he's still on boats all the time. But I think the first thing for us was certainly safety.
Yep.
The second thing was good show. And so if you sweep spot guys remember, there were 2 seats in the very front of the boat. So technically there could be 42 on the boat because you'd have 20 up top. Well, actually 20 up top, 6 in each of the 3 cabins, and then 2 on the bow seat. Yep. Once in a while, the supervisors on duty would come and pretend like they're just standing there talking by the exit, but really they would tell the guy on dock, leave the bow seat open for me, which would make the guy on dock real popular because, of course, everyone on the waiting in line wants the bow seat. But then the supervisors would hop on and take a seat and spiel check you. And it's because they wanted to make sure that while we were back out behind that island, we weren't either driving crazy or saying jokes that were not SOP. And so safety was first, but they also wanted to make sure that we were holding with theme, that we were telling the right kinds of jokes, that we weren't just completely duplicating Jungle Cruise. And once again, for the cream of the crop, like the 3 of us on this call, we never had any problems with that. But once in a while, some guys would get a little slap on the wrist for this or that joke that probably they wouldn't have told if they knew a supervisor was hiding on the boat.
Yeah. Luckily, we always had a pretty good crew. So, for the most part, we were tipped off that someone might be, shopping us on there. So then you can do your normal, I don't remember what our limit was, 13-minute trip, do the right spiel. But when talking about the fun times when you're not doing that and the times that you could get busted, there's a good, there's these times where you could be out by the Indian village sitting there for 10 minutes just riffing on what the Lakota chief is talking about.
Yeah.
You could have a great time, sit there and shooting reed rockets at him and stuff, supposedly.
Maybe that's what I've heard.
Yeah. I think that, people love hearing about, the different, you were speaking of like pranks and just fun times that you had. So feel free to tell any of those stories.
Well, I'll tell you what. So, we're talking about the safety of the keel boats and the rafts and the canoes. And, you're figuring there's, like I said before, 10 canoes, 2 big boats, 3 rafts, and 2 keel boats. That's a lot of traffic. You see the big boats out in the front. You see the rafts crossing back and forth. And if they're using the third dock, which is over by the cider mill there, or what do you call it? The little, the third dock.
Yeah.
It would be really busy. So the canoes had a specific path they had to follow. They had to hug the island. They had to go through the rapids. They had to cross at certain points in order to get to the next sharp turn. So as a keel boater, and as Jim was mentioning, it's wide. It's like 6 feet wide, maybe a little bit more. So you're walking way to your left. You're walking way to your right. You can't see anything ahead of you. Once in a while, a guest would go like, "Hey, there's a canoe right in front of you." That kind of thing. If there's a canoer that's not in the rapids, that's always a danger spot out there. But speaking of the rapids, that was always a fun for us, practical joke spot, because as those canoers would go through, and it's even if it's some of your old timers that just want to have a good time with, we could I don't even know how to say it, but so you can speed up the keel boat enough to where it would suck the water level down, and all of the jets that made the rapids would soak everybody on the canoes.
Yep, they would shoot water up where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd soak everybody as they're going by on the canoes there, and everybody kind of looks back. You make them all point and laugh, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's always hilarious when you're working dock on the keel boats, and the boat goes out, and then it comes back in, and the mast of the keel boat is covered in tree branches, and you're like,
yeah,
there.
Yep.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Or the front of the boat is drenched, because they stuck the front end in the Big Thunder Falls.
Yes. Yep.
Oh.
So, just talking about Big Thunder Falls. So my wife and I happened to be at one of the soft openings the other day, first day back, and I hadn't been on the Twain in a long time, and they've got the Gully Wumper mock-up sitting out front there. Uncle Jed's cabin's no longer Uncle Jed's cabin. It's Mike Fink's cabin now.
Yep.
Big Thunder Falls is gone. I had no idea.
Oh, no way.
Oh, yeah. That's been gone since way before they did the Galaxy's Edge overlay.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, the whole Cascade Peak is just, the whole mountain is gone.
Wow.
It's just a berm now. It's not even a high up mountain peak. Cascade Peak with the Twin Sister Falls on one side and Big Thunder Falls on the other. That's long gone.
Wow. Guess it's been a while.
Yep.
Did you have any
such a cool ride.
Any celebrity? Did you have any celebrities on your boat?
Some, I think.
No.
Yeah.
Mostly we'd see them walking by and say things to them. I'm trying to think who was on. I think we saw what was his name? The dude that had the Hustler magazine.
Larry
Flint.
Flint was over.
Excuse me, let me rephrase that. I have no idea who you're
I
talking
have no idea. I remember him coming by and kind of on the lower area by Haunted Mansion. He might have ridden the ride, but I remember him going by. I remember other people going by and us shouting at him to come and ride the bride, and of course they would never, the tour guides would never take them on the keel boats.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, in my time there, I probably saw, and this was Captain EO and late 80s for me. So Michael Jackson was the big thing. Yep. He loved going on the Haunted Mansion, and so what they would do for him is stop the line at the front door and clear out the entire Haunted Mansion. Stop letting people down in the expanding room, and clear out the actual hallway and get everybody on the clamshells. And once that was completely empty, then they would let him walk down the hallway by himself. But how they got him down there was a utility stair, which is what us keel boaters would use to get into the mansion, because that was the closest bathroom. And usually we would take a break there instead of our lunch because it was the closest shade and the closest bathroom. Well, one time I really had to go. It was in the middle of the summer, and I went into the mansion and the security guard was blocking me inside the stairwell. And I'm like, I gotta go. And he said, no, you gotta wait. Michael Jackson's right here and you're not intruding on his space. And so I had to wait for Michael Jackson to stand there in the hallway. They let him go down the hallway, look at the portraits by himself. And as soon as the security guard let me out, I hightailed it into the men's room and then ran back out to the dock, probably maxed out on somebody. But so I never had celebrities on my keel boat, but that was one of the closer brushes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of celebrities. I loaded Michael Jackson on Pirates once, but never on the keel boats.
Oh yeah, I loaded AC Green on the Haunted Mansion because the Showtime Lakers. Yes. In the 80s, and it was funny because he came around the corner and he's literally a foot taller than everyone else coming around the corner at the foyer of the mansion. And I was like, oh yeah, but we always had to play it cool and not make a huge deal and let them enjoy their day. So I was going to jump in because I have one story, and I don't know if you other guys have something random and wacky like this, but as far as close calls, there's one that we had when I was working, and it's a friend. His name was Doug Kronick. He was on the dock and I was loading up one of the keel boats, don't remember which. And so I'm doing the load spiel. he's, grouping and letting people get onto the boat. And this was before they put the netting in on the posts on the dock. And so it was just literally poles with a couple cross poles, but it was like 2 feet of nothing between the lower pole and the dock. And so I'm standing there 1 foot on the dock, 1 foot on the boat, like you're supposed to help guide the people up to the staircase. And there's this little girl crawling around, and she probably was 2.5. I don't know who she was with. She had like a pink, onesie on or something. And she's crawling around on the dock, and I'm literally bent over, holding her head back so that she doesn't crawl out into the water. And so the whole time I'm spieling, I'm like keeping this girl from crawling into the water. So I wave over to the dock guy, and he looks over and sees her. And so we think everything's okay. I turn around, she's not there. She must have crawled between someone else's legs. So he pushes me off, and I'm 15, 20 feet from the dock. I turn around, and all I see is Doug's feet, because as soon as I took off, that kid crawled off the dock straight into the water.
Oh my. And
Doug watched her, and all of you guys have seen that water. It is not the crystal clear blue water we joke about. I mean, you cannot see 2 feet. And he whipped his hat off and did a dive. And he said he just aimed for where he assumed she was going to be. And as his hands were kind of starting to get to the bottom, she rested in his hands, and then he brought her up. But if he hadn't been watching because of me kind of pointing to this kid crawling around, it would have just been a splash, and no one would have even noticed that she had gone into that water. And I came back, and there's, of course, 15 security guys and supervision, and Doug is standing there sopping wet. He told me later that all he heard was the splash, and he yelled at the top of his voice, "Holy!" And then he said something that rhymes with banana split, and it starts with SH. And jumped in and got the kid, and he got some sort of a written commendation. And he said they politely left out his language of choice that afternoon because they were just so happy he had saved that kid. And then not very long after that, they put the netting up so that you couldn't even get a fist through that netting. It's super tight weave.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, how scary.
I didn't have anything like that. I did have, you were talking about coming into the dock hot one time and the rope broke.
Yeah.
So, we were trained if the keel boat's coming in real hot, not to actually rope it. There was a giant, I don't know if you guys remember that, but there was a giant stump right there that there's a big loop. Yeah. As you're pushing off the keel boat, you got the loop draped over. And as you got more skilled, when that boat come in, you can actually reach down with the pole and give it a quick flip and actually flip it like you're lassoing onto that stump. So I was doing that. I don't remember who was driving the boat, but I was on the dock, and that thing was coming in hot. I went to go do to the loop, and I looped it. I nailed it, but then the push pole actually got stuck between the loop and the stump. Ooh. And the hook actually ripped. And I'm holding it. At this point, I'm between. Let's see. So my back is towards the water. I got the stick off to my left on the mansion side. So the pole actually hits me like on my left side, pushing me towards the water. The pole snaps, the boat hook itself actually flies onto the Bertha May and sticks in the wall next to somebody's head.
Oh.
So there were people on the bow. So it flew right on I guess it would be maybe where one of the shutters are, that front shutter, and actually stuck directly into that thing. If that would have hit that person, that probably would not have been pretty.
Yikes. I think these days there's probably 15 things we could list. Any one of those would be a no-go as far as trying to resurrect that attraction with all the Cal OSHA rules these days.
Well, yeah. So my ultimate story is, I was a trainer. Me and John Prentice trained most of the people during that time period. And I trained this guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. And like 2 years later, he was going around the river, and I was in a canoe like right behind him. And he turns the corner by Twin Sister Falls, and the boat is tipping and tipping and tipping. I see the propeller come out of the water, and I'm like, dude, that is really far over. And all of a sudden, it just bailed over, capsized. People on the top went flying in the water. People in the cabin were stuck. The engine came off its mount, and we docked our boat right there, or canoe at the dock, and we're throwing out the life preservers. and that was the last day the Keel Boats operated because it closed. And I, like a week later, put in my 2 weeks notice. I was getting ready to move to Oklahoma State for my PhD. And when I was in grad student housing at Oklahoma State, I was out on the porch and I was playing the banjo, and which I learned how to play out there. And this dude in a suit comes up and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for James Wilson." I'm like, "Hey, that's me." And he hands me this envelope and then just turns around and walks away. And it was papers that I got served. And somebody that was on that boat was suing Disneyland, and they named, you could name up to 100 John Does, and I think John Doe number 7. That when I trained him, I should have known 2 years in the future that he would capsize the boat, and I shouldn't have signed him off.
Oh my gosh!
Ugh, jeez.
It was crazy, and
Wow.
I didn't have to do anything. Disney took care of it. Like they have the best lawyers in the world, so I never heard anything really about that. I think they just paid him off or whatever. But I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like,
I was actually I was the Adventure Frontier Custodial Foreman when that happened.
Yeah.
So I had a nice view from over by Big Thunder Mountain.
Yeah.
And I had a guy on my crew. This is before smartphones and all that stuff.
Yep.
And he had a camera in his we had these side packs that would attach to our belts. And he pulls out his camera and he's taking pictures. And I'm like, I'm his lead, and I'm like, I don't see you doing that.
Smart.
And like the Mark Twain was coming around by the Indian village, and we couldn't radio them, and we couldn't stop it. We knew like this thing takes like 100 feet to stop or whatever, and it can't see us laying in the water where we were at. Like fortunately, it got stopped, but we were like thinking this steamboat is going to run over this like keel boat that's underwater.
That's nuts. And just think how much water that thing pulls backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, that's spreading folks in the boat and all their goods everywhere.
Yeah, we saw bubbles coming up from under the water, and we were terrified it was people trapped, but it was just the propane coming out from the gas tanks.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
I was on the
great.
big house that day. I was sitting on the foyer when I got that call.
Yeah.
Yikes. That was well after my time.
Yeah, that was nuts, and like that was the last day, and after that.
Well, that's a day that all of us keelboaters just kind of think of as the darkest day because that was the end of it. But when I think back, I have a couple. A lot of the days just kind of drift in together, and it just feels like one big old long boat trip. But I don't know if these other guys have something similar. But there's one boat I remember where. There was a kid, he was probably 10 or 12, and he was deaf, and his parents were signing to him, and we took off, and the kid was sitting at the very top of the ladder, so he could see right over the edge and see me. And I could tell that he was trying to read my lips, and the parents were trying to sign, but that spiel is not something that you can just interpret and sign on the fly. And in 30, 60 seconds, that kid was just bored, and I could just see his face drooping, and he's just kind of looking at me because I'm standing there with this black microphone in front of my face, and I'm kind of looking ahead to the canoe dock because I had to make sure nobody was coming out that I was going to run into. And then I just realized this kid is not going to have a good time. So what I started to do was completely clown around and act like I was tripping over the cleats that were on the sides of the boat, act like I got twisted up in the microphone cord, turn around and forget that the tiller ball was there and hit my stomach into it. And luckily I was able to do that kind of stuff while I was still actually spieling and not hitting canoes and steering. And so I kind of tried to add that in so that this kid could have some fun. And so he was nudging his parents and trying to get them to pay attention to me because they, of course, were looking at the scenery I was talking about. And by the end, you could tell the parents really appreciated things, and the kid just had this giant smile by the end. But that was one time where there's all these things you have to do on a keel boat, and then I just added a little bit more because in that instance, that was a guest that wasn't going to be having a good time, and luckily by the end of it, he did.
Yeah. The funny part about that is that's actually Brian's normal trip around the river there, getting all caught up and tangled and tripping and falling down.
Oh, man, we talked about you not spoiling my secret there.
Sounds like you guys had a lot of fun. That's so cool. I think that I mean, we probably keep going on and on here about your time there because you also worked other attractions.
Yeah, definitely.
You had to work other attractions because they didn't run. They only ran these seasonally.
That's right. And in the winter, your Keel Boat shift, when it was winter hours and winter sun, it was only 11 to 4 or 12 to 5.
Yep.
Yeah, Park was only 10 to 6 then, right?
Yeah. So sometimes we'd end up out on Main Street helping do guest control, or sometimes in the summer you would end up doing 4 hours Keel Boats and 4 hours electrical parade, depending on what the rotations were like.
Yeah, one of the glory trips for me was in the late summer, fall, as things were winding down and the sunset was getting earlier and earlier. There were some shifts where you could hold off on the last trip or two, and when you took it, it was dark, and you had the lights on the gully, and the river was pretty dark out there.
Yeah.
Just you, because the canoes were already pulled in, and it was just like super peaceful and really neat out there, like you were actually like keel boating in the 1800s, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course, that's when those flocks of 300 crows would come around too.
God, that's crazy.
You'd start feeling like you're in the sequel to The Birds.
Yeah. So wildlife-wise, there was one or two incidences of animal botulism that went through the duck population.
Oh.
And there was one summer where there were just dead ducks all over the river, and I was with staff one day, and whoever was on keel boats, I can't remember, I yelled over to him. I was on the island side, and I was like, hey, there's a dead duck, like, stuck up against the keel boat, and the driver got the push pole, and tried to pry the duck loose because it was stuck in the wash of the boat. And all of a sudden the duck disappeared under the water, and then the keel boat's motor was going zzz, and it goes and this big old wake of feathers and blood behind it going.
Oh my gosh. It's not the kind of attraction Disney would create today, you know, because it's low capacity, right?
Way
you
low.
know, and it's there's a lot of, you know, there's more risks to it than the kind of attractions they have now. I liked sitting up in those front seats. I don't know how I would I don't know if I would wait around, so I would let people go ahead of me in line or whatever, so that somehow I would always try to get those.
Yeah.
People would ask and we'd do it, or if there was a young couple or something, you throw them up there or whatever. It was a great ride. In today's world, I doubt it would last because the jokes are not PC. They're very kind of racially and a little bit of misogynistic based and whatever. Yeah, so
that's true. Yeah, we did the three of us and three other people did a refloat video that you guys might have seen last July for quarantine. And I purposefully left out all the references to any Native American stuff that was on the river or anything that was written into the spiel because, I was a sociology undergrad and I have nothing but utmost respect for the First Peoples who were here before. And I just didn't feel that I even wanted to have any of that old stuff in. And so we have a fun, long video without any of that in there, just mostly talking about wildlife and other kinds of puns, but not any of those references, because all these years later, it's definitely not correct. It's not what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And Keel Boats was all about reading your audience too, right? So you're jumping on there and you can tell right away if people are going to laugh at what you're going to say, pretty much right out of the gate. Or if they're, maybe you got a tour group, maybe you got 40 people that are coming in from somewhere else that don't speak a lick of English. Then you got a nice quiet trip for 8 minutes.
Or loud, if they just want to talk over
true.
you. Some people just wanted to sit down, and they saw we had a short line or no line.
So funny part how popular Keel Boats was is I'm sure you guys have all seen it too, but you could be sitting there, your keel boat can come and go. You'll have a guest standing in the corner of the dock just waiting for the raft to come pick them up to take them to the island for like 10 minutes.
Yep.
Well, the Keel Boat gave there were those two other ways to get around the river, the canoes, which you had to paddle, and the large boats, right? But the keel boats gave you a unique perspective, especially if you're up top or out or on the front. It's a really great view of the scenery along the river, and you didn't have to paddle like you would with the canoes.
Correct.
So that was really nice.
Well, and I also got to say, when it was raining, we had to get out the rain gear because we had half of our capacity that was still protecting people from the elements. And so you could get 18 people, sometimes a little bit more, down into those cabins. And so they made us run in the rain. And there were little gutters on the side that would drain the deck. Yeah. And there'd be these little spouts of water going off the side. But sometimes we would just be sopped. And they even had these little bonnet plastic things to go over our hats, because those hats were super cheap and felt. And you'd be sitting there with 10 pounds of water soaked up into your hat from the rain if you didn't put the plastic on. But yeah, they had us going in the elements. And all of a sudden, if it was raining, we'd be super popular all of a sudden because people realized there was a roof to get under.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you figure in the rain, the island shuts down because of the mud. I don't know if canoes ran in the rain. I don't think I've ever paddled in the rain, but yeah, keelboats for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. Not in serious rain, little sprinkles maybe, but
yeah,
it doesn't rain in Orange County, so we're good.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was trained on canoes, but I probably actually worked it 10, 15 times at the most, because there were so many guys who were trained on both, and if they got put on keel boats, a lot of them hated it so much, they would come and find me because they knew I liked it, and they would trade me for my canoe shift. And so anytime I had a canoe shift, probably 4 times out of 5, some guy would come up and want to do a change to get out of being on the keel boats because they were either afraid of spieling or whatever it was. But so I did canoes, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, and there was kind of 2 kinds of cast members in West Side Attractions. There were the river folk, and then there were the land, attractions people. There were people that liked Pirates and Mansion Splash, and then the river people liked to be on the river no matter what.
Yeah.
That's very true. I mean, you figure on the west side, you got the big ride, so you have a lot of A cast members, right? So a lot of our, looking back, they were all old, but they were probably like 30 years old. They're a lot of the A cast members, so a lot of the long shifts, long hours. So, as one of our young river guys, between the 3 of us, we're all 18 and scrawny and goofy, and we get put on a splash shift with these folks who are ancient to us at the time. It was, it was different. I wanted to be back on the river.
Yeah. In the river, you had, Bobo on canoes and Paul Bast and Chris Shepard and Joy Weber and Alan Duncan and all these guys on the rafts and the canoes and everything. It was a pretty tight-knit, river rat kind of group.
I tell you what, talking about Bobo, I remember when my first canoe shift, I was getting trained, and I walk by, and the dude pinches me with his toes hard that it bruised me.
Yeah, their toes of steel, man.
Oh, man. Yet another thing from the 30 years ago that wouldn't be flying today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess you also got to figure that when the 3 of us worked the river at the time, it was, other than rafts, it was all male, right? So it was all men on the canoes. Yep. It was all men on the keel boats. I think the 2 river boats were also all male at the time.
Yep. Yeah, and Joy was the only one that was trained on keel boats.
That's right, because she was going to be the raft lead, and you had to know keel boats to be the raft lead.
Yep. She was the first woman to get out above, like up on the, or at least on the keel boats and stuff. And the canoes, I think she was a canoe lead also. So she pushed the boundaries open there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was after my time. I had to get a Thai job right after college, and so I think I worked. I know, and here I am still. A month after I graduated college in 1990, that's when I put in my notice. So I was definitely just there for the 4 years of university life, and then out.
Yeah.
But I married a Disney girl, and I met her in the break room of the Haunted Mansion. So luckily, that's where I was taking my breaks.
Yeah. A couple attic trips on the breaks, and
No.
Little visit to the Mylar table and pirate.
Only I never went up to the attic in the mansion because I'm afraid of heights.
Oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about the Mylar table. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's an entirely different show. Let me.
I never used. You never know. I never used it if I forgot about it. So
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh
That's
my
funny.
gosh.
I could do an hour on each of the rides I've worked. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
opening crew of Splash would be its own show for sure. And I was on night crew because I was in the we're opening 6 months late and we need to cover 3 shifts instead of the 1 shift we were planning for back when it was supposed to open in February. So I was one of the last minute college add-ons for that opening summer, working till 2 in the morning. So we've got all kinds of stories.
Yeah, I would definitely like to hear that because that attraction has been my obsession. So
Well, you better go ride
Yeah,
it
let's
soon before it
revisit that.
changes.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, so of course. Now you mentioned finding a Disney gal. I found a Disney gal, but not while we were both working there. I was still working there. She wasn't. But I wanted to say I stole some of the spiel for the Keel Boats in giving a speech at my own wedding reception.
I love it.
Because I said, I started out by saying family, friends, in-laws, outlaws.
Oh no!
Oh no.
Lend
Well,
me,
the
lend
yeast you
me
could do
your
for the
ears.
sourdough you made.
Yeah. So that's, I lifted that from the Keel Boats. So, and that was years after the Keel Boats closed. But I'm sure there were some people at my reception who got it because they were just as much Disney enthusiasts as me. So, yeah.
That's
That's
great.
funny. Like I met my wife working at Disneyland as well. We've been married for 22 years coming up here. Just talking about the friendships. I mean, like the 3 of us here, we've known each other for 20 years. Pretty much all of my friends that I have are from Disney. I haven't worked there for over 20 years. All these guys, we've all been gone for over 20 years, but my base of friends are all Disney still. We have our Disney West Side reunions, or we were at least pre-COVID, but every other year or so, and you still have 200 of our friends show up.
Yep,
It's
absolutely.
great.
Well,
Such
the
a crazy
scary,
little close-knit community.
yeah, and
Yeah.
the scary thing is now some of us that have kids, our kids are now at the age that we were when we all met each other 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's starting to get scary. So, but we can still act 18 anytime you need us to.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, guys. I definitely want to revisit the Splash Mountain, especially before it changes over. But we will definitely do that. But thank you so much for coming on, and it was a lot of fun. I hope everyone enjoys hearing your stories.
I'd just like to thank you for having us, and on behalf of the other 2, we all enjoyed being had.
Yeah. I lost a llama. Our river dirty.
Okay, well, that concludes episode 308 of the Sweet Spot Podcast.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Now that was great. I say this a lot, but I really, really mean it. I could have just encouraged those guys to keep talking for more hours.
Yeah.
That because I missed that attraction. I really liked it, and I liked hearing their insights, and they brought back some really great memories. So that was good, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed that too.
Yeah, it was kind of unique that we had 3 people on at the same time. But I think that sometimes those are the better ones because those guys, we just kind of were there just to add a few questions, but they were pretty much self control. They were doing their own thing, so which is cool.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you to them for coming on and sharing their stories. We appreciate it. All right, a couple of things here. I always say that we'll read our reviews, read your reviews that you leave for us, and I only read the ones on Apple Podcasts. That's probably the more popular one, and that's the one I use listening to podcasts, so I just read those. If there is other places where there are reviews, I wouldn't mind looking those up and trying to read those too, but I just don't know if you can do that. But let's start with this first one. So we have a couple actually, so I'm really excited to read these. And we always ask for your honest reviews, and we have an honest one.
They're all honest, Lynn.
I know, but this one is okay.
Okay,
So-
go ahead. Yes.
No, but this fella, he's probably still a current listener too, so which is good.
Yeah.
I don't think he left, but this is from Radio Guy Chris, it says. And this was April 17th. And it says here, used to be better. So right there you're like, oh no. So it says, I used to love this podcast because of the unique perspective these guys gave on Disneyland and its history. But they've gotten so political lately that it is now a rough listen. Okay, this is just my, because you can't write back to these people. And I'm not upset, but I was really confused because I didn't think that we were getting political. We had a couple of things that we had opinions about, which I think we're entitled to. If he's speaking of some of the changes to some of the things recently. But I didn't think we picked a side or said anything.
Well, I don't know. I don't know necessarily what he's referring to, because I mean, there's the differences between Florida and California. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Because we noted that the parks in Florida have been open. All kidding aside, all joking aside, the parks in Florida have been open for months and months and months. Mm-hmm. And Florida is part of the same country. I mean, some people don't think it is, but it is. And we've all been dealing with the pandemic, but they've been open and Disneyland's been closed. So I don't know if that's what he's referring to, is the politics of that. I tried to make it so that this podcast is fun to listen to. If you're not an extremist on either side, this podcast should be fun to listen to.
And we joke around a lot too. Yeah.
So, we joke. I mean, I joke. I poke fun. Sometimes I'm poking fun at my own beliefs, and we just try to make it enjoyable. And so, if you want to be more specific and tip us off to what was bothering you, I would go ahead and email us at thesweepspot@gmail.com so we know what to avoid, because I don't want to tick anybody. I want people to enjoy this podcast just like I want them to enjoy Disneyland. So, So I'm sorry if we said something that upset you. I mean, we deliberately try to avoid that,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we also, like I said,
we're human beings.
Yeah,
we're human beings with our own,
opinions.
experiences and whatever.
And I respect all opinions, and I would hope that others would do the same. So, okay. The next one is, it's called, it was on, wow. These are out of order. Okay, the next one is, they put them on here in a weird order. April 23rd, Disney Fan John and Disneyland Nerd, and they cut off on this app. It cuts off the rest here. Okay, so let's read the review. 5 stars. Oh, that last one was only 3 stars. So maybe we can change that someday. Okay. This guy gave us 5 stars though. Absolutely love listening to these guys talk Disneyland. There are so many great stories and glimpses into Disneyland, Disney Universe that allow those of us fascinated with and in awe of the empire Walt designed to get a more intimate feel for the human magic involved in making fantasy come to life. I've always had the utmost respect for anyone who has to clean anything, but when I listened to my first episode, the Bathrooms of Disneyland episode, it really opened my eyes to an oftentimes forgotten but amazingly important team of people. I've listened out of order, picking podcasts that sound fun to me, and have enjoyed hearing how the podcast has matured over the years. Aww. Thanks for taking the time and energy to share your experiences, passion, and love with strangers around the globe. And then he added something else, I guess, to it. It says, I just wanted to edit my review and update that these guys are still my favorite podcast. I listen to a handful of Disneyland-specific podcasts, and Ken and Lynn just have the right take on the fandom of the parks and the creativity behind the magic. I hope they continue for years to come. Wow, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, it cuts the titles off on. Maybe it's just on the app it does that. But this is April 23rd, also by Lobos 305. This is Magnificent Disneyland That's all I can see. 5 stars. It says, I listen to many Disneyland podcasts, and this one is my top choice. Always entertaining with knowledgeable guests. They wrote a wonderful book called Cleaning the Kingdom, which I received for Christmas and enjoyed very much. They continue to perform at a high level with excellent content and great interviews.
Oh.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And there's one more, just to help swell our heads a little more. No, this is good. I enjoy this, and I it's always good to hear criticism and hear good feedback too. So,
yeah.
This one is just last Saturday. It's this Saturday, by Bobby Bend. It says, like a virtual trip to Disneyland is the title. The sweet spot with Lynn and Ken is like a day at Disneyland with an old friend. What I mean by that is that it is a comfortable listening experience. Ken and Lynn were contemporaries working at Disneyland and became good friends because of this knowledge of how Disneyland works and functions, not only physically but emotionally, as it pertains as to the guest as well as the cast members. You feel as if you were there when they were. My wife and I listen almost every night, reviewing and reliving the older episodes. Okay, I know we must be Disney nerds, but so be it. Tune in to the sweet spot and you will most likely become hooked. Bob and Kathy Nelson.
Oh, well, there's worse things to be than Disney nerds, you know.
Thank you, guys.
It's a good thing to be a Disney nerd, I say.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, everyone. And if you'd like to leave a review, we truly would appreciate it. It's free to do, and it takes a few minutes, and it really does help us out. And we'll read it in our next episode. Ken, anything else?
Just spread the word. Tell people we're here so that they can keep up to date on what's happening with the newly reopened Disneyland. And so that they can learn about Disneyland history and learn things they never knew. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening and for your support.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.